Ladies and gentlemen, how are you? Today is December 26, 2025, and we are in the midst of the crack up boom. Turns out the Austrian economists were correct. During the holiday, we've witnessed the price of silver, which has been absolutely skyrocketing, gapped up about $10 in a single day. And you realize that, most importantly, confidence in the system is waning. Most of the traditional systems have become degenerate and corrupt, and therefore you're witnessing a flight into real values. Now, this will be posited as both a detrimental Mad Max type of gloom and doom scenario, and like all things, we should be stoic and we should just do some analysis to recognize what is. While you could recognize this as the collapse of the American empire, you could also realize that in the long run, the market cannot be conned. The market is inevitably correct. It turns out that the current methods of running society do not, in fact, work. You cannot have unlimited credit expansion. You cannot have a welfare state and open borders. You cannot have inflation, debt monetization ad infinitum to finance bailouts, to finance stimulus checks, to finance halting the market economy, etc. And so the chickens of profligacy have come home to roost. Now, the question becomes, what do you do about it? Number one, there's not going to be any contrition by the people, the modern monetary theorists who previously said you can print money ad infinitum without a cost. Turns out the rest of the world has woken up to the fact that the United States is only good for exporting electronic database units, and therefore there is fragmentation in the global order toward a multipolar world. That is, perhaps at some future juncture in the immediate term, the U.S. will cease to be the world's reserve currency issuer, and that entails a lot of hardship if you are in a society with a currency that goes from world's reserve to not. So, tips for navigating a currency crisis. We have Ludwig von Mises of the Austrian School of Economics. The Austrian school is effectively what you would call real economics compared to the modern day American intelligentsia, which is based on Keynesianism or unlimited credit expansion, unlimited debt. Now, we have this quote: there's no means of avoiding the final collapse of a boom brought about by credit expansion. The alternative is only whether the crisis should come sooner as the result of voluntary abandonment of further credit expansion or later as a final and total catastrophe of the currency system involved. Now, the current problem: we must navigate a changing world order, which is marked by credit expansion. When you see credit expansion, that is a catch-all term to explain the expansion of the monetary system. You must remember, we don't actually use money. It is debt. It's a credit system. And so the central bankers will couch this as, they'll say, we're not printing because it's electronic or some other derivation. You hear about quantitative easing. You hear about inflation. You see the rising chicken prices at the store. It doesn't matter how you want to say it. Ultimately, it comes down to the system of debt is expanded with more debt, which decreases the value of the currency unit. It causes rising prices, generally dubbed inflation. Now, we must navigate this system because it is not enough to complain about the Austrian school being correct. The reality is that your position on whether the Federal Reserve should exist or not, or the system of usury should exist or not, is a fairly moot point. The only thing that you can do is control yourself. So we're going to run through how to navigate the current changing world order, which is marked by credit expansion, rising consumer prices, a decline in the average standard of living, note average, and we'll get to that in a minute, a decline in civil liberties or freedom generally, increasing conflicts, both foreign wars, and you start to see the war on terror is starting to rise domestically, marked by, the Patriot Act and then renewal of the Patriot Act, and now it's just like open Palantir spying and profiling Americans, etc. Increasing on conflicts we covered, social division. You look at social media as nothing but politics and people advocating for the use of force to achieve their will, and rising volatility. Now, this can be summed up in the two following charts. On the left, you have gold, currently trading at $45.27, and silver, currently $4,527 per ounce. And you have silver on the right, trading at $78.43. I believe right now we are up to $79.25, last I checked. We're getting into the territory where every time you refresh the silver price, you're just looking at a new price. It's like Weimar-style inflation. Now, what you need to understand here is it has long been taught by the American university system that false dogma like gold is a barbarous relic. I once spoke to an investment banker about 10 years ago. We were talking about different asset classes, and I was a proponent of gold, and I said, we were discussing whatever, and I brought up gold. And his immediate response, without thinking, was, gold's a barbarous relic. He just said that because that is the Keynesian term. He just repeated something that he had been indoctrinated to understand. What you need to understand about the current changing world order is that the American system of indoctrination and the fundamental beliefs of most Americans are collapsing in real time. These people are wrong in pursuit of power and money, which they pursue credit. In fact, it's not money, but because they pursue credit or the monetary benefit to their families, they are willing to sell out, which means that you look at the American system of education, and in reality, it's a system of branding in order to pursue power. It's not really about education. So these people will adopt whatever false doctrine is placed in front of them that they are obligated to memorize in order to try to get ahead. The downside and the opportunity is they believe in false notions like treasuries being risk-free. All of modern finance is modeled based on the notion that government debt is risk-free. Think about how stupid that is. Government debt is not risk-free. When they monetize debt and create more debt, it depreciates the currency unit. So the notion, this is what is taught in American business schools, is that government debt is risk-free because the government can always redeem the bonds if it issues its own currency. What they what they omit intentionally is that debt is redeemed with currency units of increasing supply, and the currency unit is therefore worth less. Now, our simple solution here is, to be honest with you, is be exceptional. You see, a lot of the modern, you've had the rise of social media over the past 2 decades in particular. And it's interesting to witness how social media today is completely different from social media even 10 years ago, or when it first came out and was like nascent. It used to be social. It used to be kind of cool. You could go network with people. You could reach anybody around the world. You could legitimately form these connections with people across the globe through the internet, the digital bits and bytes. You could think about that. You could form friendships and relationships through digital means. Very powerful tool. But it got corrupted, and it became a system of advertising. And in doing so, it is, in essence, become corrupted to the point where they're ad networks, and they have become methods of propaganda. And social shame has become one of the primary methods of facilitating control amongst the population. So you'll often see that men are like, there's been an absolute war on masculinity. There's been an absolute, even men are not really allowed to participate in the public square. Remember, if you came out 5 years ago and you said, this is not correct, halting the market economy is not correct, this is a psyop, you were just deplatformed. Anyway, moving right on. The solution here, in the grand scheme of things, is to focus on yourself. As much as you want to disdain the current state of affairs, or as much as you might identify that the current, a lot of people say things like end the Fed. You're not going to end the Federal Reserve. And you never end a system by denouncing the system. You just engage in creative destruction. You adopt a new system. The thing about inflation is that you can protect yourself, but you can't protect other people. You can make decisions that benefit you, but you can't make decisions that benefit your neighbor, or you can't make decisions that benefit, the state of Wisconsin or what have you. So rather than a lot of people come out and they try to change the world. There ought to be a law for this. It's like, how about we just focus on governing our own lives so that we become more prosperous and productive? And you'll find that the averages apply to the average. And our entire thesis here is that we need to be exceptional. And being exceptional is the way to disregard the status quo. It's the way to disregard, GDP went up or down by 4 percentage points. Doesn't matter. You could change your psyche today, and you could transform the inputs that you have in your own life. You could become more productive. And over the next 10 years, you could 10x your productivity or 100x your productivity by changing. Maybe you start a new business. Maybe you get influence. Maybe you do something that is more productive to society, and therefore it benefits your own position. And you don't have to worry about the inflation. You don't have to, if you have a means of production, chances are, regardless of the currency unit, you can always produce for somebody around the world. Anyway, so our solution is predicated on be exceptional. We don't want to fall subject to the law of averages, and therefore the solution here is just be exceptional. And as a man, you'll realize that society only cares about men who are genuinely superior. And I'm not talking about performative superior. I'm not talking about, I'm talking about legitimately better. Society responds to the man who takes care of his body, mind, who has good relationships, is well connected, and who has money. You can only, some people, the era of faking it on Instagram with the rented, they've already done Bugatti, they've done all of the cars, all of this stuff, all of the materialism has already been flexed. Now what actually counts is a legitimate ability to perform. And in order to be an exception to the rule, right? Because inflation is very painful for the mass populace. And again, we are not going to solve all of America's problems, but we can start by focusing on ourselves. And if we are going to, in order to be an exception to the rule, we must be exceptional. And by being exceptional, we have to realize that life is competition. And it's a strategic advantage to be better than other people. And this is something that has been shamed. A lot of men are shamed. Who do you think you are? Or, men are shamed into, you should be humble, or etc. That is all a control mechanism. Those are methods of manipulation. Anyway, we need not pay attention to the status quo. All right? We don't need to pay attention to what the averages are doing. Again, you notice in any industry, it's always the top company that takes the entire market. There's basically one social media for text, Twitter. There's one social media company for images, Instagram. There's one social media company for et cetera, for video, TikTok, etc. This applies to most industries. Now, you can argue that some of these there's a regulatory bureaucracy and cartelization of each industry, but the point is, this is the way that most markets work. You would think, and you often hear this in startups, where somebody will say, if I could only get 1% of Facebook's network, then I would have a profitable business. But the thing is, Facebook takes all. The winner in any market generally has a superior product or some durable competitive advantage that they take all. So we need not pay attention to the averages, and our objective here is to be better than everybody else. So it's a strategic advantage to not pay attention to the status quo. And if we take action to produce beyond what we consume, then we will produce material wealth. And this is the strategy to thrive no matter what happens next. And the principal takeaway here being that we don't need to be concerned with the opinions of other people. Most people are average. So think about this. If we recognize that most industries are dominated by the best player, for everybody who tries to invent a company in a specific industry, there's one winner and like 10,000 losers. And this applies to life as well. There's generally a few guys that are flexing on Instagram as the influencer du jour. There are a few, there are a few women. There, like most people, most industries are dominated by a few players. So if you recognize that you must be better than the next 10,000 men, why would you be concerned about their opinions? The average person has a negative psyche, a negative output, a negative life. And so if you recognize that the advantage is in being better than other people, and I don't even care that people will say, oh, what do you think you're, like, you hear this one a lot. What do you think that you're better than other people? Yes, that is a strategic advantage. If you are better than other people, you will outperform them and you will realize the benefits of being better than other people. This goes into any industry. If you're an engineer and you're a cracked engineer and you are 10 times better than your competition, you're going to make compensation that's better than most of your peers. So the notion of attacking somebody for being superior is a method of manipulation to cause you to try to be less than as a means for somebody else to gain a strategic advantage over you. It's a manipulation tactic. And there's a lot of social shame, which is a very low vibrational state that people employ to try to cause you to not be great. And what I'm trying to convince you here is that the method to winning is to actually win. All right. Next, we want to capitalize on the changing world order. We are undergoing a significant reorganization of the understanding of the world around us. Everything that society currently understands about the world is proving to be false, and the rise in precious metals prices is the canary in the coal mine. You might see, it really doesn't matter whether silver trades at $80 an ounce, $100 an ounce, $200 an ounce, $500 an ounce. All of that is basically inevitable. You're just going to get a revaluation in precious metals mathematically. So the reality is, yes, exit the financial system, own real assets. That is a solution. But more importantly is the mindset that you can adopt. And if you do this earlier than everybody else, if you adapt and understand that American excellence is the way forward, and there are no excuses, because America's getting fleeced by the nature of the credit system which it adopted, and that is the construct of the system. The system is working the way that it is supposed to work. A usury system of credit, of money, it's not money, but a usury system where you use debt as money, issued at interest, is designed to enslave you. It is designed to extract resources. It is designed to make it harder for the average individual to thrive. This is why the system is working perfectly. This is exactly what it was designed to facilitate. And there has long been some understanding that you can have, they called it modern monetary theory. Notice you don't hear about this anymore because it's a failed theory, but it was useful at the time when they were inflating the money supply at a tremendous rate. And every year there's some new economic fugazi definition invented. First it's QE, quantitative easing, and it's whatever. Every day it's a new thing. Then it became modern monetary theory. Oh, it's modern. It must be good. And it was just based on the false notion of unlimited credit expansion, which we now see in the rise of precious metals prices is illegitimate and does not actually work. So what I'm trying to demonstrate here is there is a significant shift that will take place from the current position of what most people believe to be correct versus what is actually correct. And there's plenty of ways to capitalize on this. For example, you notice the rise of podcasters who have much different opinions than were popular 5 years ago. For example, Nick Fuentes. Who knows whether this guy's legitimate? He seems to be called controlled opposition quite a bit. But the point is the people that are thrust into the limelight are technically useful, and the people who are popular represent the psyche of the American public who doesn't really feel like they can speak. And so you see the rise of these people. We live in a mimetic culture where culture is demonstrated through memes and the popularization of people and ideas. And so when these people rise to fame, it is because they represent a change in They represent public sentiment. And so the rise of these individuals like Nick Fuentes and other people, they demonstrate, their meteoric rise demonstrates a significant shift in the state of what is believed. Next, to capitalize on a changing world order, we want to adapt quickly. You have to realize that complaining about what is, whenever you hear somebody say, oh, we ought to, or there should, it's like, should doesn't do anything. Should is an idea. Should is discussing something that does not exist. What we want to talk about is what actually exists and how to capitalize now. We may have a system which is flawed and corrupt, but if you sit around and you complain about the corruption, that's not going to better your own current position. And lastly, we want to stop using logic to argue with losers. We just want to win. You can sit on Twitter all day and you can, the thing is, there's no contrition. Nobody ever shows up and says, oh, by the way, I was wrong about standing on stickers that were 6 feet apart. Sorry, guys. It's like, told you so, but there's not any contrition. The people who told you, oh, no, you have to cover your face with a t-shirt for my health because I drink frappuccinos and I don't care, but you should. Remember that crowd? Where are they now? Are they apologizing? No, they pretend like that didn't happen. So there's not going to be any contrition. You're not going to use any logic on these people, and any energy expended like trying to use facts and figures to get them to come around to your line of thinking is just false. All right, number 3, we want to curate a valuable mindset, a high-frequency mindset. You want to be a high-frequency individual. The thing is, most people wake up, and a lot of the people that you see who you'll get into a meeting with somebody and they're particularly ebullient, or they have a generally healthy, optimistic, ebullient psyche, that is curated. They're not just born as like these ridiculously happy people and all good things are happening to them and therefore they're happy. No. They're happy and therefore they're not even happy. It's resilient. They recognize that curating a high frequency mindset is a strategy towards resilience, and resilience is a method to overcome all problems. There's a saying that winners win and losers lose. If you have a winning mindset, you will do whatever is required to win. You'll figure out a way to overcome any adversity that's in your way. The thing is, a lot of people think that, oh, it must be nice to be rich. You see all these complaints, these stupid complaints that people put out there into the world. And it's a reflection of them. That's the one thing that you come to understand about the internet is most people's comments are a reflection on them, of them. People go online to get their worldview reinforced. They don't go to actually, they're not trying to change their perspective. So it's funny that you have infighting in the culture wars, but people are not participating in the culture war to try to change their perspective. They are trying to gain power by convincing you to change yours, but most people just go to get their worldview reinforced. At any rate, all people encounter hardships, difficulties, and challenges. That's why they say life is suffering. The difference is that winners, number one, curate suffering intentionally so that they can deal with it up front rather than dealing with the suffering of regret later. But they find ways to overcome the current challenges, and they view life as happening for them and not to them. So I think this is a massive thing that is lost on most people. They think that winners win and therefore they get a good mindset as a result, or losing people have problems and therefore they end up depressed. The reality is depressed people curate their own losing, and resilient people curate or manufacture their own winning. So we have to recognize it's a strategic advantage to curate optimism no matter what. There is no sense in going entirely black pill. And yes, you might have to understand that the credit system it's working. So your complaint about it doesn't really matter. Going super black pill about the credit system only serves to your detriment in that going completely black-pilled means that you basically give up. You basically become the consummate pessimist. I saw a guy online who was depressing as could be. This guy was maybe 50, 60 years old, complaining about how he was alone for the holidays and he didn't have a wife or kids or anything. And you look and you say, that's unfortunate because his bloodline is going to expire. And you saw the commentary of his posts, and all he was doing was complaining about politics. And you realize, like, your opinion's irrelevant. You're not going to carry your opinion forward. So complaining online is not really doing anything. Like, you might think that you're participating in the culture war, and perhaps to some degree you are, but you're not really influencing anybody. And ultimately, you're not even carrying that forward. And so therefore, you're permanently losing by the nature of your expiration. So we have to recognize it's a strategic advantage to be a high-frequency individual, because being a high-frequency individual allows you to deal with the day's current challenges in a proactive manner that overcomes them as quickly as possible. We're not defined by the challenges that we encounter, but our response and our ability to adapt and overcome them. And lastly, we need to be stoic and realize that abrupt reactions are never the answer to any problem. And in fact, whenever there is a artificially imposed time sensitivity is generally a method to cause people to evoke a reaction. And I cannot think of any situation in which you're really hard pressed for you can always take more time to think and to arrive at a prudent solution. Obviously, you have to take action. Which brings us to the next point, which is to be high agency. We need to take immediate action today. Anything that can be done should be done. You have to stop procrastinating. Stop leaving things off. They compound in your mind. And procrastination, you really realize that life is either the nature of action or you either act through inspiration or desperation. And so you want to make sure that you are a high agency individual who's acting on purpose. You are defining the future trajectory of your life by taking action rather than procrastinating, which results in inaction, scarcity, and more difficult circumstances. Next, do main character shit. Just everybody has these ideas of the person that they want to be, and that ultimately ends up being kind of what we're obligated to do. The highest respect to God that you can pay is to be the man that you admire. It is to self-actualize and to do, like, everybody has this person in their head that they wish they are. Just define that person and then be that person. And then next, we want to disregard people who speak contrary to your aims. Life is filled with these people, and the sooner that you realize that their opinions are worth nothing, the better off you'll be. It's a tremendous strategic advantage to realize that most people, their opinions are worthless. These people are not going to pay your bills, and therefore their opinion is worth nothing. I think a lot of society has been conditioned to believe that their society has become performative by the nature of the like button. People do things, oh, does this get a like? Oh, this person criticized me, and then they cower, and then they don't do that thing. The reality is you should disregard everything that most people have to say. Be high agency. Be responsible for your own actions. If you are comfortable with the way that you act, then that's the only opinion that really matters, is your own. And in fact, all judgment is irrelevant. I believe there's an old Chinese saying that is something to the effect of, the man who blames other people has a long way to go. The man who blames himself is halfway there, and the man who blames no one has arrived. Which brings us to the next point of abolish shame. We're going to disregard the opinions of other people. Again, most people are losing. Most people, we're not trying to be average. We recognize that the strategic advantage here is to be better than other people. It is to be exceptional. Therefore, we don't care about the opinions of what other people have to say. Most people possess a losing mindset and they project their failures onto other folks. Crab in the bucket mentality. They try to impose their limiting beliefs onto you. Their opinions are worth nothing. More importantly, over the past 10 years in particular, shame has been weaponized online. Number one, you don't know if these people are even real or if it's dead internet theory. Maybe these are bots. And a non-zero number of the people that you interact with online are fake. And in fact, you go on most social media platforms and it seems like in excess of 20 to 50% of the accounts on these sites are bots. Which means that some of them are saying things which promote agendas. They serve as propaganda. They serve as a psychological warfare weapon. So we really should just disregard the opinions of anything that we read online. Shame has been weaponized as a mechanism of control. And the thing is, as a man, you realize that masculinity is the ability to withstand criticism and to adhere to your principles and ideals. Shame is a mechanism of manipulation which aims to cause you to be performative toward likes. And the man who tries to be likable will never be liked because it symbolizes and signals weakness. If you aim to, and this is a huge issue, a lot of people aim to be liked, and therefore they conform to whatever the societal norm is. But the societal norm is shaped by big tech and large companies which do not possess American values. And in fact, a lot of them possess anti-capitalist, anti-American values. So shame has been weaponized to cause people to cease certain actions, to censor their speech. And it's very, very detrimental, but it is a mechanism of power and control. And the way to overcome this is realize there's a strategic advantage. You can be better than other people by recognizing this and then refusing to embody shame. It's a low vibrational state. It's a low form of energy, and it's a mechanism of manipulation. Next, humility is weakness. I'm going to say this as a blatant point. Humility is weakness. Nobody looks to the timid man and says, well, I'd love to follow this gentleman. So you hear sometimes you'll hear people say, oh, don't be arrogant. Okay. There is such a thing as too much arrogance when it is false arrogance or when somebody is overly boastful and extremely loud and performative and obnoxious. But that's rarely the case, and those people are coping. If you have legitimate skill and you are legitimately excellent at your craft, you don't need to be concerned about this, and you should be confident. See, we lack confidence in the modern day in society. It's not that we have an arrogant society. Perhaps to some degree you could look at it like that. But for the most part, we have a society which is particularly weak and particularly has been shamed into being humble, which nobody benefits if you don't believe in yourself. Lastly, we need to stop aiming to be liked and you need to seek to be respected. This is by adhering to your principles. Act in a way that is commensurate with your values, and you don't need to be concerned about being liked or disliked. Regardless of what other people think, you will curate respect. Next, we want to adopt a winner's mindset. So we need to reframe everything. Life happens for you, not to you. And again, this is just a strategic advantage. The sooner that you adopt this perspective, the higher your frequency, the greater your ability to overcome certain challenges, and the faster that you will achieve your aims. You have to remember you can't change the outcome anyway. The sooner you get over something that happened, the greater your advantage. Next, we need to self-actualize. You need to produce abundance in these 4 quadrants, really, which is your body, mind, your relationships, and money. But with respect to your body, where your body goes, your mind follows. So curating a strong body results, it makes you impenetrable to it makes your mind impenetrable to other forms of weakness. Second, with respect to your mind, we need to read daily and continuously learn, in addition to a lot of other things. And these are just rough bullet points here. Obviously, you're going to want to undertake, clearly with respect to body, you're going to want to do, this is not going in depth into each one of these topics, but with respect to your body, you're going to want to go to the gym, eat healthy, do all of the things that you know that you should be doing. There's a reason that the Greeks were impenetrable. There's a reason that they were strong. And if you study the Greeks, you realize all of these guys were ripped. And it's because they understood where you take your body, your mind will go. Anyway, on relationships, number one, I think that you need to pay attention. You need to curate a network and realize that your personal connections are extremely valuable, especially considering that they've been disrupted by psychological operations over the past decade. The public right now public psyche is undergoing a massive shift amidst inflation, which is the rise in higher prices is going to make life more difficult for the average person, and therefore they are going to look for solutions because they will realize that the old method of doing things does not work. This is why silver is absolutely skyrocketing now, because it has long been posited that bullion banks have been artificially suppressing the prices of precious metals as a means to mask the inflation. And so what it has done is it has skewed massively the public's fundamental understanding as to what is acceptable as a method to run a society and what is not. It has been thought that you could print money to bail out companies, for the Fed to buy corporate debt, to give out stimulus checks, etc. And now that you see the rise in precious metals prices, that is a revealing of the fact that inflation is not risk-free. It doesn't come without a cost. So rapid changes signal that the old method does not work, and values will return to what does, which will be traditional American patriotism. On the topic of money, we need to be productive. We need to produce more than you consume. And this is important to stress because you could say this to people and they understand it. And then they read The Secret and they're like, ask, believe, receive, and abundance. And it's like, go produce. Produce more than you consume. And the magic internet money, the magic money will show up in your bank account by the nature of delivering value to the market economy. And you say this to people and somehow they know this, but some people just do not do it. Which brings us to the next point, and that is establish a means of production. You need to master a skill, produce value for others, and produce more than you consume. If you have a method of producing value for other people, then you need not really be that concerned about the general price level. Now, getting into the real meat and potatoes of, because this is titled How to Navigate a Currency Crisis, is diversify into hard assets. We are witnessing the flight into real values, that is the higher metals prices. There's both a silver short squeeze happening right now, but that is because metals have been artificially suppressed. And you see that precious metals have been the best performing assets since the turn of the century. Interestingly, if you took the stock market and denominated it in gold instead of dollars, you would realize that most of these stocks are not even generating a return on capital that renders their business profitable. Anyway, precious metals are one method of exiting the credit system. Farmland is another strategy. if you want to talk about communism, how impervious to the downfall. If you really believe that the country is falling to communism, which that's a debate for another day, and as time goes on, maybe. But farmland over the next 5 years definitely seems like an intelligent move. Obviously, there are challenges. During other periods of communist-style declines and hyperinflation, you see people recede from cities to rural communities. They engage in farming, and that is a way that they keep food on the table because they produce it themselves. And other assets like foreign real estate, perhaps cryptocurrency, up to you. Next is exit the system. Now, this is the best solution to navigating the rise of communism, or you say the fall to communism in any society, is to leave. I think that there are fanciful notions of American patriotism. Obviously, this will or will not, everybody's circumstance is different. But there is what you have to realize, and what we learned over the past 5 years, is the people around you all have a psyche, a psychology, or an understanding of the world that's false. And to some degree, they believe in that false psychology. They're waking up and seeing precious metals prices are rising, but they still believe that government debt is risk-free. All of Wall Street goes to work, and they operate on this false mathematical calculation that government debt is risk-free. And this has been ingrained into them. When and you look at the educational system, it is a system of indoctrination. And so it's very difficult to suggest that your neighbor is suddenly going to just wake up and believe like you believe. In fact, a lot of neighbors were screaming at you for not complying to their will a few years ago. So your neighbor is very susceptible to a psyop, which makes the notion of American patriotism and fighting to preserve the system or what have you is fanciful at best and probably detrimental and just mentally tiring and destructive. Remember, when they did bank bailouts a decade and a half ago, a bunch of people went down and they protested, Occupy Wall Street, they're down banging their pots and pans, and nobody cared. They protested the Iraq War, nobody cared. So there are certain circumstances where the public can affect change, but the notion that people don't act until it becomes more comfortable to act rather than to remain stagnant. They love the path of least resistance. So I think Americans don't understand the absolute economic booms that are taking place in other jurisdictions like China, like Southeast Asia, like there are a bunch of other places where you see the physical, material rise of tremendous cities that are currently taking place, and you compare it to American cities, and you realize that with the decline of Western society is the rise of other jurisdictions that most Americans do not know about. Next is a topic of network states. This is the idea that this is a term that is dubbed by Balaji, I don't know his last name, from Coinbase, former Coinbase CTO, who basically posits that the future of states might be formed through digital communities. That is, we're witnessing a reorganization. You see people leaving blue states going to red states, but you see people are migrating and moving in order to align with people who share the same belief, because we saw how dangerous your neighbor can be when he comes and screams at you for selling lemonade because you're supposed to be afraid of air. That's all wrong. Now, people will reorganize to associate with people who believe like they believe because this is a method towards strength and power. And therefore, the position is that as America engages in more infighting and social division and less freedom and a loss in the standard of living, the internet will serve as a mechanism for people to reorganize into digital communities, which might then entail physical locations, and perhaps some of those physical locations eventually become bona fide jurisdictions. But the point is, the advantage here is to, we say exit the system, but even online, it is to find communities and in person, to find people who believe like you believe. It's no surprise that Americans have been indoctrinated. The system has forced down the idea of diversity being a strength, which is actually false. Diversity is a conflict. You can't run a company with diverse set of opinions. Everybody thinks that the mission should go in some other direction. At a company, if you want to achieve an objective, you have to all align. And it doesn't matter if you personally align. Everybody in the company has to at least strive in the same direction. And if you have a diverse perspective as to the different objectives that should be achieved, you won't achieve any of them. So in a company, you need unity. In the military, you need unity. You know, imagine if all the troops in a war were just like, well, I think we should do this. No, we should go here. We should go. No, there's a reason that there's order, because that works. Diversity is disorder. And you see that we have the rise in a tremendous amount of immigration, and it results in disorder. Lastly, adapt. There's a massive reversion to American values. Figure out a way to capitalize. You see people that are podcasting. You see people that are engaging in pro-American businesses. You see people who are engaging in American manufacturing, etc. Pick a skill, master the skill, and figure out how to capitalize on the changing world order, because there's a yin and yang to the situation. This is often posited as there's going to be a Mad Max, crack up, boom, complete breakdown of society. It's like all of that is a waste of energy. That is people grifting. That is people trying to predict gloom and doom. The reality is, even if there was the worst style depression, if you let the market do its thing, people want comfort. They will go to the ends of the earth, if necessary, in a crisis to figure out how to return to a state of comfort, which means you don't really need to be too concerned about a collapse or whatever is often said. More energy is wasted on trying to predict collapse than is useful. What's actually useful is to just get a skill, master the skill, be productive, produce, add value, buy real assets, and be a principled person, and be stoic, and be consistent. You don't need to be concerned about some Mad Max style state of affairs. And most people, the next point is the traditional finance crowd is wrong. You need to realize that we have to adapt, and the rest of the market is going to have to adapt, and they will through metals prices and other real assets. What most people believe to be correct is false. And there's an advantage here if you realize this. It was considered extreme. In April, I made an article and talked about how most Wall Street banks were revising their estimates of a higher gold price. And the most extreme example was Goldman Sachs, who said maybe 4,500 would be achievable in a recession case. It was like the most extreme example. And we got there by year end. And at the time, there were plenty of people who said, oh, that's ridiculous, that's extreme, etc. And it turns out we got there by year end. So the point is, most people are wrong. And there's a reversion to sanity. And a lot of people need to go through the pain. The faster that you adapt, the better. Which also applies to the current understanding of American society in general. All of the decadence, degeneracy, fueled by debt, feminism, the inversion of logic, the inversion of traditional gender roles. There's a reason that influencers who are speaking about traditional American values are trending, because the faster that you adopt what has worked for America, which is American values, the faster that you realize the people who are trying to invert American values have caused the system to become corrupt. Well, I would argue it's the usury system which has corrupted the economy. And in general, there are useful idiots who have adopted a communist ideology which is being rendered as incorrect. So the faster that you adapt, revise, and define and adhere to your own principles and realize that the things that have traditionally worked in America, traditional American values, are coming back into vogue. And the people who have tried to invert society, who try to take exception to everything, who try to invert a 1 or put a 1 where there should be a 0, etc., the people who don't believe in math or the binary system, all those people are wrong. The faster you disregard them, the better. And lastly is abolish fear. Back to the fear-mongering of a Mad Max-style hyperinflation, whatever. Perhaps we will endure hyperinflation, but there are still opportunities amidst hyperinflation. Perhaps there is a breakdown of the currency system, but you would do better to go forward without fear, which is what it says in the Bible repeatedly, is fear not. Just abolish fear. There's no strategic advantage provided by having anxiety or fear. Be present, realize today is a good day. If you have a roof over your head, then be grateful for what you have today. And lastly, disregard calls for collapse. This is a change. Collapse often evokes the end. It evokes it evokes the worst state of affairs. What we are going through is, again, with life, there's a yin and yang. There might, for one person, a change in events might be terrible. But when you realize that energy is neither created nor destroyed, you realize that energy is just going from one place to another, which can be a beneficial thing for you individually if you find a way to capitalize.